I was lining up the perfect shot on my own land when suddenly sirens. Within minutes, deputies had their guns drawn, screaming at me to drop my rifle. Why? Because some HOA president called 911, claiming my property was their land. But here's the kicker: they were dead wrong. And by the time I was done, they'd regret every second of this fight. Stick around, because this is the wildest HOA takedown you'll ever hear. If you think I was in the right, drop a 1 in the comments. Let's show these HOA tyrants what real property rights look like. Asterisk Part 1. The incident that changed everything. Never thought owning land could feel like a battle. It was supposed to be my escape, my sanctuary. The property was more than just a few acres of dirt. It was a legacy, a place where I could breathe, where I could live on my terms. But one day, that all changed in a way I never saw coming. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I grabbed my rifle and headed out to the back acres of my property. I loved the quiet, the kind of silence where you can hear the wind whisper through. The trees where the distant hoot of an owl reminds you that nature still rules here. I set up my target, positioned myself, and steadied my aim. Then came the sirens. At first, I thought they were just passing by on the highway a few miles away. But no, these sirens were getting closer. My heart started pounding when I realized they were coming straight toward me. Within moments, the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the trees, and before I could even process what was happening, 3 sheriff's deputies stormed onto my property. "Drop the weapon. Hands in the air?" one of them shouted, their voices cutting through the air like a whip. I froze. I've never been the kind of guy to panic. But I'd be lying if I said my hands didn't shake a little as I slowly placed my rifle on the ground. I lifted my hands, my mind racing. What the hell was going on? I wasn't trespassing. I wasn't breaking any laws. This was my land. The lead deputy kept his gun trained on me as another officer approached. "What are you doing out here?" he demanded. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice as even as possible. "I'm target shooting on my property." Officers exchanged glances before one of them muttered into his radio, "We got a report of an armed individual trespassing on HOA land." I felt my blood pressure spike. HOA land? You've got to be kidding me. This land belongs to me. I have the deed, the paperwork, everything. The officer narrowed his eyes. "We got a call from the HOA president. She claims this property is part of their community greenbelt." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I clenched my fists, trying to keep my frustration in check. That's complete nonsense. This land was bought outright years before that HOA even existed. I have zero claim to it. The deputies didn't look convinced. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just some mix-up. The HOA wasn't mistaken. We're trying to take my land. I had a choice. Could let them push me around, let them strip me of what was mine, or I could fight back. Asterisk Part 2. The battle against the Hoth moment, the deputies left. I knew this wasn't over. If the HOA was bold enough to send law enforcement to intimidate me off my own property, they wouldn't stop there. They had power, connections, and probably a game plan. But they underestimated one thing. I don't back down. The next morning, I drove straight to the county records office. If I was going to fight this, I needed proof. And sure enough, there it was. A legally binding document showing that my property line has been established long before the HOA came into existence. Their so-called greenbelt didn't include my land, not even close. Armed with this, I called a real estate attorney. As soon as I explained the situation, he let out a low whistle. "This isn't the first time I've seen an HOA try to pull something like this," he said. "I think they can bully people into surrendering land by making them believe it's not worth the hassle to fight." Well, they picked the wrong guy to mess with. I had my attorney draft a formal cease and desist letter, making it clear that any further attempts to claim my land would result in legal action. Then, just to make sure they got the message, I attended the next HOA meeting where I made sure every homeowner knew exactly what kind of scam their board was trying to pull. You should have seen their faces. The HOA president, looking. Woman named Karen, of course it was Karen, tried to brush it off. "There must have been a misunderstanding," she said, flashing an insincere smile. I wasn't having it. A misunderstanding? I said, my voice carrying through the room. You called the cops on me? You sent armed officers onto my land? That's not a misunderstanding. It's intimidation. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Homeowners who had blindly trusted the HOA suddenly weren't so sure anymore. People started asking questions. Why was the HOA trying to claim land that wasn't theirs? How many other shady moves had they? Pulled Karen's confident facade started to crack. We were just trying to ensure community safety, she stammered. I cut her off. No, you were trying to steal what isn't yours. Guess. And if you push this any further, I'll take you to court and make sure the entire neighborhood knows exactly what kind of corruption is happening here. Silence. Then, finally, one of the other board members sighed and turned to Karen. Maybe we should drop this, he muttered. Damn right they should. Within a week, the HOA officially backed down. They sent me a written apology, which I framed by the way and promised never to contest my property rights again. But I didn't stop there. I made sure the entire ordeal was documented online, in legal records, and anywhere else people could see. Because HOAs like this thrive on silence. They count on people being too scared, too exhausted, to fight back. Not me so. If you're ever in a situation where some power-hungry HOA tries to take what's yours, remember this. You have rights. Don't let them intimidate you. Fight back. And make sure they never forget the day they messed with the wrong person. And hey, if you think I was in the right, drop a 1 in the comments. Let's make sure these HOA bullies know we're watching. Asterisk. Chapter 3. The truth comes to light. Jake stood his ground as the officers surrounded him, all of their hands gripping the holsters of their weapons. The weight of the situation pressed down on him like a lead blanket. He had done nothing wrong. This was his land, his sanctuary, his escape from the chaos of the world. And now, thanks to Karen Whitmore, he was being treated like a criminal. Sir, lower your weapon, one of the officers commanded. His voice steady but firm. Jake kept his shotgun pointed toward the ground, his fingers carefully away from the trigger. I'm on my own property, he said evenly. Check the records. I own this land, fair and square. Karen, standing just beyond the police line, crossed her arms with a smug expression. Officer, this man is trespassing and hunting illegally on HOA property, she said, her voice dripping with false authority. He's been warned before, but he refuses to comply. Jake clenched his jaw. He knew exactly what she was doing, trying to strong-arm him into following her ridiculous HOA rules by sheer force. But she had underestimated him. He wasn't some naive homeowner who could be bullied into submission. The officer in charge exchanged a glance with his partner before keying his radio. Dispatch, run a property check on a Jake Reynolds. Confirm lot ownership. Minutes passed in tense silence. Jake could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Karen, meanwhile, looked entirely too pleased with herself, as if she had already won. Then the radio crackled to life. Confirmed. Lot is privately owned by a Jake Reynolds. No HOA jurisdiction. The shift in the officer's stance was immediate. Hands eased away from weapons, tension visibly draining from their faces. The lead officer turned to Karen, his expression darkening. Ma'am, our records show that Mr. Reynolds owns this land outright. This isn't HOA property. Karen's smirk faltered. That can't be right, she stammered. There must be some mistake. No mistake, the officer replied. You reported a crime that didn't happen. It's a serious offense. Jake watched as Karen's confidence crumbled. The realization dawned on her that her little stunt had backfired spectacularly. But even as the officers questioned her, Jake knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to give up easily. She sure as hell wasn't the type to admit she was wrong, as the officers packed up and left. Giving Jake an apologetic nod, Karen shot him a look that sent a shiver down his spine. It was the look of someone who had just declared war. Chapter 4. Retaliation and rebellion. Didn't take long for Karen to strike back. A week after the police confrontation, Jake found an envelope taped to his gate. Inside was a neatly printed letter from the HOA detailing a series of infractions he had supposedly committed. Fines totaling over $5,000 had been levied against him for offenses such as unauthorized structures, failure to comply with landscaping regulations, and violation of HOA hunting policies. Jake scoffed as he read through the absurd list. Unauthorized structures? His cabin had been here for years, long before the HOA had even been established. Landscaping regulations. He lived in the middle of the woods. And violation of HOA hunting policies? That was the biggest joke of all. His land wasn't part of the HOA to begin with. Anger bubbled in his chest. But he forced himself to remain calm. This was exactly what Karen wanted to bait him, to force him into a position where he would have to fight an uphill battle against the bureaucratic nightmare she controlled. But Jake wasn't about to play by her rules. The next morning, as he was loading supplies into his truck, a tow truck pulled up to his driveway. A man in a bright orange vest climbed out, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Reynolds?" the man asked, barely looking up. "That's me. I'm here to impound your vehicle." Jake blinked. "The hell you are." The man sighed, tapping his clipboard. "Orders from the HOA says you haven't paid your fines, and they have the right to seize property." Jake took a step closer, towering over the tow truck driver. "This land isn't under the HOA. My truck isn't under the HOA, and you're trespassing." The driver hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. "Look, man, I'm just doing my job. You can take it up with them. But if I don't tow this thing, I get fined too." Jake exhaled sharply. It wasn't the driver's fault, but that didn't change the fact that Karen was overstepping in the worst way possible. "You're not taking my truck," he said, voice like steel. "And if you don't get off my land in the next 5 minutes, I'll have the sheriff out here charging you with trespassing." The driver held up his hands in surrender. All right, I'm leaving." As the tow truck rumbled away, Jake's mind raced. Karen was getting desperate. She had tried intimidation. She had tried legal trickery. Now she was resorting to outright theft. It was time to fight back. That evening, Jake met with his lawyer, Travis, a sharp, known-sense man who had little patience for HOA antics. After reviewing the documents, Travis frowned. "This is illegal," he said. "Completely illegal. The HOA has no claim over your land, and these fines are unenforceable." "And why are they doing it?" Jake asked, leaning forward. Travis set the papers down and steepled his fingers. "Because they're trying to push you out. If you don't push back, they'll keep escalating." Jake nodded, determination setting in. "So what's our next move?" "We go on the offensive," Travis said. "We hit them with a cease and desist. File complaints with the county, and if necessary, take them to court. But first, we gather proof." Jake's lips curled into a grin. "I think I can handle that." The next day, he set up hidden cameras around his property. He knew Karen wouldn't stop. She was obsessed with control, and that obsession would be her downfall. Sure enough, within days, the footage captured Karen sneaking onto his land with a clipboard and a measuring tape, marking spots and taking notes. He had hurt trespassing on private property, illegally attempting to survey land that didn't belong to her, with the evidence in hand. Jake and Travis filed formal charges. The legal battle began, but this time, Jake wasn't the one. On the defensive, the news caught wind of the story. Corrupt HOA president attempting to steal land through intimidation and fraud. It spread like wildfire. Homeowners who had suffered under Karen's reign came forward, revealing years of extortion and abuse. Investigations uncovered financial misconduct, bribery, and a long history of fraudulent fines levied against residents. Then came the final blow. One morning, as Jake enjoyed a quiet cup of coffee on his porch, he heard sirens wailing in the distance. Moments later, police swarmed Karen's house. She was led out in handcuffs, her face pale and stunned. Justice had finally come knocking. As the HOA crumbled under the weight of its corruption, Jake stood victorious. He had fought back against the tyranny of a power-hungry woman and won. His land was safe, his freedom secured, and as he looked out over the rolling hills of his untouched, unregulated land, he smiled. This was his home. And no one, no corrupt HOA, no Karen Whitmore would ever take it from him. Chapter 5. The breaking point tension in the room was suffocating. Single overhead light flickered, casting erratic shadows across the cold, sterile walls. Ethan stood motionless, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists. Across from him, Olivia's eyes brimmed with tears, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, years of resentment and heartbreak woven into the silence. "You lied to me," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible, but razor-sharp. "All this time, ... everything was a lie." Ethan swallowed hard, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had always known this moment would come, but he had hoped foolishly that he could outrun the truth. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, his voice hoarse, "but you did." Olivia's voice rose, breaking on the edge of a sob. "You let me believe we had something real when all along you were hiding this betrayal." Ethan took a step forward, his hands trembling. "It wasn't like that. I was trying to protect you." A bitter laugh escaped Olivia's lips. "Protect me by lying to me, by keeping me in the dark while you—" She shook her head, her fury barely contained. "I trusted you, Ethan, more than anyone, and you destroyed that." The weight of her words pressed down on Ethan's chest. He reached out instinctively, but Olivia recoiled as if his touch would burn her. The pain in her eyes was unbearable. He'd fought battles, had faced impossible odds, but nothing had ever wounded him like this. "Olivia, please?" His voice cracked, desperate. "I love you." She flinched, the words cutting her deeper than any lie. "No, you don't. You love control. You love secrets. But love, real love, it's honesty, Ethan, and you don't know what. That means—" The room felt smaller, closing in on them as the truth settled between them like a chasm. Ethan wanted to bridge the gap, to explain, to make her understand. But how could he, when he himself had spent years building the very walls that now trapped them both? Finally, Olivia wiped her tears away with the back of her hand, her resolve hardening. "I can't do this anymore, Olivia." "No," she cut him off, shaking her head. "You made your choice. Now, I'm making mine." Ethan watched as she turned and walked away, each step feeling like a knife twisting deeper into his heart. He wanted to call out, to stop her, but for the first time in his life he realized something devastating. He had lost her. Just maybe, he deserved it. Chapter 6. The reckoning city was alive, neon lights reflecting off the rain-slicked pavement as Olivia moved through the crowded streets. She could still hear Ethan's voice echoing in her head, could still feel the weight of his betrayal pressing against her chest. But she didn't stop, not this time. She had spent too long living in the shadow of his secrets, of his half-truths and manipulations. Tonight, she was reclaiming herself. Her fingers tightened around the small envelope in her hand, the last piece of the puzzle. The final truth she had fought so hard to uncover. Inside was the evidence Ethan had tried so desperately to keep hidden, and now it was in her hands. Olivia stepped into the dimly lit bar, her heart hammering against her ribs. Across the room, a figure sat alone, nursing a drink. As she approached, the man looked up, his expression unreadable. "You came," he said. She nodded, sliding the envelope across the table. "No more lies, no more lies, no more games." Man exhaled slowly, his gaze flickering between Olivia and the envelope. "Are you sure? Once you open that, there's no going back?" Her fingers trembled, but her voice was steady. "I was blind for too long, not anymore." The man hesitated. For only a moment before opening the envelope. The truth spilled onto the table: photographs, documents, undeniable proof of Ethan's deception. Olivia's breath hitched as she absorbed the full extent of his betrayal. It was worse than she had imagined. Her stomach twisted, nausea creeping up her throat. Ethan had been involved in things she couldn't even begin to comprehend, things that went beyond lies and broken trust, things that could ruin lives. "What do you want to do?" the man asked, his voice softer now, almost wary. Olivia clenched her jaw. "I want the world to know." The words tasted like fire on her tongue. For so long, she had been the one left in the dark, the one who believed in the illusion Ethan had so carefully constructed. But not anymore. She stood, pushing the chair back with a quiet scrape. I won't let him win. The man nodded, sliding her a burner phone. Then we start now. As Olivia stepped back into the night, the rain falling around her like shattered glass, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Idea 7. The final confrontation. Air was thick with tension as the final confrontation loomed over them like an impending storm. The weight of every choice, every sacrifice, bore down on their shoulders. The battlefield, once a place of camaraderie, had become a graveyard of broken dreams and shattered loyalties. As the enemy forces closed in, Alex clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. He could feel the trembling resolve of his comrades behind him. Their breaths were ragged eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. There was no turning back now. The final stand had begun. The enemy leader, a shadowy figure cloaked in darkness, stepped forward. His voice, like a venomous whisper, echoed through the silence. You should have joined us, Alex. You had the chance. Alex met his gaze, defiant and unwavering. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. A smirk played on the enemy leader's lips before he signaled his warriors to attack. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Swords clashed, spells exploded in brilliant bursts of color, and cries of pain filled the air. Alex fought with everything he had. Every swing of his blade was a testament to his unyielding spirit. His enemies fell one by one, but for every one that fell, 2 more seemed to take their place. He could hear the screams of his allies, each loss cutting into him like a dagger to the heart. Then he saw Heralera, one who had stood by his side through every battle, every loss. She was surrounded, her strength waning. With a desperate cry, Alex surged forward, cutting down anyone who dared stand in his way. Just as he reached her, a blade found its mark not in her, but in him. Pain blossomed in his chest, but he refused to fall. He turned, his sword sinking into the enemy who had struck him, but it was too late. The damage was done. The world blurred around him as he dropped to his knees. Ilara caught him, her voice shaking. Stay with me, Alex. We're not done yet. Tried to smile, his vision darkening. Fight for them, he whispered. For all of us. As the battle raged on, Alex felt his strength slipping away. But he held on to one final hope that his sacrifice would not be in vain. Idea 8. Anew. Dawn's battle had ended, but the scars remained. The once great city now lay in ruins, smoke rising into the crimson-streaked sky. Bodies littered the ground, a grim reminder of the price they had paid for freedom. Ilara stood amidst the wreckage, her body battered, her spirit worn. Alex had fallen, but his sacrifice had given them the chance to fight back, to reclaim what was stolen. Now, she carried his legacy forward. The survivors gathered around, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion. The enemy had been defeated, but victory felt hollow. How could it be called a triumph when so much had been lost? Ilara took a deep breath, stepping forward to address them. We have won, she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. But we must never forget what it cost. We fought for our future, for our right to choose our own path. And now it is up to us to rebuild. There was silence, then a ripple of murmurs. Us. Some bowed their heads in sorrow, while others lifted their chins with renewed determination. Had not been extinguished. It smoldered in the hearts of those who remained. As the sun rose over the broken city, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange, Ilara made a silent vow. She would not let Alex's sacrifice be in vain. She would fight for peace, for a world where no one else had to endure such pain. And so, the first stone of a new era was laid, not with hands, but with unbreakable resolve. Lessons from the Storithus story is a powerful exploration of human nature, resilience, and the consequences of choices. Through its intense and emotionally charged events, we can draw several important lessons. 1. The power of perseverance. No matter how dire the situation, perseverance can lead to survival and even redemption. The protagonist's journey is filled with hardships, yet their determination allows them to navigate through unimaginable challenges. This reminds us that giving up is never an option. Even in our darkest moments. Point 2. The consequences of betrayal. And Grieth's story highlights how betrayal and greed can destroy relationships, families, and even entire lives. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it often leads to irreversible damage. It serves as a warning that selfish ambitions and dishonesty can have severe repercussions. 3. Strength. Comes from adversity. Hardships often shape a person's character. The protagonist's transformation through suffering teaches us that challenges are not meant to break us, but to forge us into stronger individuals. Difficulties can teach valuable life lessons, making us more resilient. For the importance of loyalty and compassion throughout the story. Moments of kindness and loyalty stand out as beacons of hope. No matter how cruel the world can be, genuine. Compassion has the power to heal wounds and restore faith in humanity. Choosing loyalty over betrayal, kindness over cruelty, is what defines true strength. 5. Fate and free will are intertwined, while destiny plays a role in shaping events. Our choices ultimately define our path. The protagonist's decisions, made in fear, desperation, or courage, shape their future. This teaches us that, although we may not control everything in life, we do have the power to influence our own fate through our actions. 6. Justice will prevail. Eventual health. It may take time. Justice finds a way. Those who manipulate and harm others may seem victorious for a while, but in the end, truth and justice will catch up with them. The story reminds us that wrongdoing does not go unpunished forever. 7. Hope is the strongest weapon in the face of despair. Hope is what keeps people alive. Even when everything seems lost, hope fuels the courage to fight back, to dream of a better future, and to seek redemption. No matter how bleak life becomes, holding on to hope can be the difference between survival and surrender. This story serves as a profound reflection on human nature, our strengths, weaknesses, and the choices that define us. It reminds us that, while life is unpredictable and often cruel, perseverance, loyalty, and hope can help us navigate even the darkest of paths.